And that is the reputation of eagles. They say when an eagle is chasing prey or has prey in their talons, an eagle never looks back, but other birds of prey always look back. The eagle knows that nothing will challenge it. In many cultures, this is a Babylonian flag. Here you see a Native American symbol. The eagle is said to represent the sun. There are 25 countries that have an eagle as their symbol. The Austrian double-headed eagle goes back to Constantinople during the Roman Empire. The Polish symbol is on the right, top right, and the latest country to adopt an eagle, the African fish eagle, was the Republic of South Sudan. Again, the eagles are very powerful symbols. They were also used in battle in medieval times on many heralds. So here's a few of the more recent symbols of eagles. Again, most of these are golden eagles. So it is very powerful species. There are more than 60 species of eagles in the world. They're large birds of prey, and they're members of the family Accipitridae. Excuse my Texas accent, which is not as much Texas accent anymore, but I don't pronounce things so well sometimes. Most of the more than 60 of these species occur in Eurasia and Africa. The Steller's eagle is the heaviest, and it can weigh up to 20 pounds or more. It lives in eastern Russia, and it's a glacial remnant. It developed during the Ice Age, so very, very old species. The largest is on the right there, the Harpy Eagle. If you've been fortunate enough to go down to the Amazon, Central and South America, you may have seen it because it does hunt in the daytime. It's larger than the golden eagle and the bald eagle. Its name refers to the Harpies of Greek mythology. They were monsters that were in the form of a bird with a human face. I always liked all those combination mythological monsters. It does inhabit the rainforest. It is endangered because the rainforests are being depleted. The female averages about 3.5 feet in length when it is sitting. It weighs just under 20 pounds. The male is 1/3 its size, which is true of also the bald eagle and other eagles. Its lifespan is very large, can be 25 to 30 years. Again, they do hunt during the day, and they can take mammals such as sloths and monkeys. So they would take our poodles, but they're not here. And then the smallest is the great Nicobar serpent eagle down on the bottom left, looking similar a little to our sparrowhawk. I mean, not in the same coloration, but it is the smallest eagle in the world. It weighs just under a pound, and it's only 16 inches in length. Compare that to the weight of a red-tailed hawk that can be 1.5 to 3.5 pounds and is 17 to 25 inches in length. Obviously, it isn't the size that makes an eagle an eagle. So here's some examples of the eagles of the world. Obviously not to scale. Whenever you have these kind of comparisons, they don't exactly show you, but they do show you certain things like coloration and different beaks and things like that. The Harpy Eagle was the species that inspired the design of Fawkes the Phoenix in Harry Potter series, if any of you are Harry Potter fans. Dumbledore's pet phoenix that periodically bursts into flame shares his name in the most infamous traitor in English history, Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes Day, or Bonfire Night, is a huge celebration in England held on November 5th that celebrates this fiend's thwarted attempt in Parliament. In ancient Greek folklore, a phoenix was a long-lived bird that cyclically regenerates or is born again, coming out of a flame, out of ashes. So this was the inspiration, these two birds, for the phoenix in Potter, Harry Potter. The golden eagle, Achilo chrysaotus. I took 5 years of Latin, but I wasn't very good at pronouncing it, so I apologize. That's why I write it there. In the United States, we have the golden eagle and the bald eagle. The bald eagle is found only in North America, with its greatest concentrations in Alaska and Canada, while the golden eagle can be found in North America, but also Europe, North Africa, and Asia. That's its wide spanning symbol in these countries. It has about 3 feet in length. It can weigh up to 14 pounds with a wingspan of up to 7 feet. As predators, they are carnivores and the more ferocious of the two great birds. The golden eagle will prey on small mammals and has been known to attack livestock, although they can't really pick up a sheep, and small domestic animals such as dogs or cats. It's solitary, prefers mountainous areas. We do get them occasionally in the winter, usually in the northwest corner of the state. But I heard there was one down on the shore this year. I guess you guys might know about that, but that's highly unusual. But as you know, bird species sometimes end up in places we don't expect them. I was hiking in Scotland a few years ago and I was able to see the white-tailed eagle, which is similar in looks to the bald eagle, but at sunset on the Isle of Mull, I saw 4 golden eagles flying into the sunset, and that back of their nape, the back of their head, really does shine spectacularly golden in the sun. Their range is up to 165 miles. They're the fastest eagle in the world and can fly up to 200 miles per hour when they're beating down on prey. So imagine that with those talons as they're coming down, you know, between 12 and 14 pounds, beating down on prey. There's only one bird of prey faster. That's the Peregrine Falcon, which can dive at speeds up to 245 miles per hour. We're lucky that we have a fair amount of nesting pairs of peregrine falcons in the state. You know, they've also had a rebound, so that's very great to know. Here's a little comparison, again, not quite to scale. I showed these two because oftentimes people mistake an immature bald eagle with a golden eagle. You can see there's quite a few differences. The beaks are different, the colorations. Now we'll learn more about the immatures, how their beak turns yellow over time, as do their eyes. But the one distinctive thing about the golden eagle is as it's flying, you'll see white stripes under its wings. Now, some immature bald eagles do get a lot of white mottling, and it might be under their wings as well. So it is easily mistaken, and you'll learn how easily a little later. And that brings us to the bald eagle. Take a crack at pronouncing that Latin name. But every bird species has, you know, their different Latin names, and some are hard to tell. The difference in these two eagles, I meant to say, is the bald eagles, even though their feathers are brown, it looks almost black because of the contrast with their white head and white tail. The golden eagle is brown, but again has the golden highlights on the back of the head and neck. The bald eagle has a bigger head and a large yellow hooked beak compared to the gold eagle's smaller head and black hooked beak. When the golden and bald eagle's fledglings just learn to fly, again, they're easily confused. But a bald eagle, one thing to note when you see it flying, its head and tail generally project almost the same distance. And we'll also tell you another way of how they fly later to easily identify them. I can't resist some quotes. I like literature. So there's an eagle in me that wants to soar, and there is a hippopotamus in me that wants to wallow in the mud. Now, isn't that true of all of us? You know, we have all these lofty goals set for ourselves even now during the pandemic, and we say, okay, I got to get to it. And then sometimes we wallow in the mud, but it's great to soar with the eagles and get those things accomplished sometimes. Again, the Native Americans revered the bald eagle and golden eagle because they thought it represented the sun. Anytime Native Americans would kill wildlife species, then they would have a ritual to honor the spirits of those species because they felt they gave them powers, and oftentimes felt that if they killed a certain animal, they would acquire the characteristics of that. So you can see why the eagle seeks a. So often when you see a totem pole at the top, you'll see like a bird of prey type thing, which often is called a thunderbird. Generally, they say that that's kind of a combination of the eagle and the phoenix. So one of the most famous eagle quotes, not counting the Bible and some of the other references, Houston, tranquility base here, the eagle has landed. I can tell you, having been in journalism, public relations, Neil Armstrong most likely didn't write that quote. There were probably 20 people, you know, with ties around the table, all trying to come up with what they should say when they step on the moon. But he might have said some of those words. We don't really know, but this is what he said when he did land. Again, that's a testament to how important the eagle has been in our culture. You can find anything on Google. So Longfellow Deeds is known for writing the worst first paragraph ever. But anyway, I thought this was pretty good. It's hard to soar the eagles when you're surrounded by turkeys. And that brings us to Ben Franklin and the turkey. Most of you know the story you've heard, which you may or may not know, but it's not true. So I'm going to clear it up for you. But as you know, Ben Franklin was an erudite, sophisticated diplomat. He was a genius inventor, writer, author, but when it came down to it, he was very practical. After the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, it decided it needed a seal of the country. So it went to its three most erudite men, Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson, and asked them if they could help design a new seal to represent the new country. Each of them presented a proposal, but their designs were awful. They were allegorical and pedantic. Franklin didn't choose a turkey at that time, but rather Moses standing on the shore of the Red Sea, extending his hand over it and causing it to overwhelm Pharaoh, who was sitting in an open chariot engulfed by waves. Adams chose a young Hercules, choosing between the flowery path of self-indulgence and the rugged uphill way of duty to others. And Jefferson went back to biblical things and chose an image involving the children of Israel in the wilderness, trailed by a cloud and a pillar of fire. Imagine putting any of those on a coin. So the Congress decided, forget it, this is ridiculous. We're just going to table this. We have other things we need to attend to right now, so we're going to let it lie on the table. They did enlist two other committees that didn't come up with much. So finally, they went to the most respected man in the Continental Congress, Charles Thomson, who was the secretary of the Continental Congress for its entire 6-year existence. They asked him to create a design because I think they saw him doodling sometimes during their meetings. I'm not sure, but he apparently was somewhat of an artist. Before the Constitution took effect in 1789, they were both the executive and the legislature. So there was no president, only president of Congress. And Thompson's job combined what are the duties of the Department of State and the Secretary of the Senate and the Clerk of the House of Representatives. He had a great reputation, and if a congressional paper appeared with his name on it, somebody would say, "Here comes the truth." So highly respected. As you see his on the original Dunlap broadside, the copy of the Declaration printed the night of July 4th. His is the only signature next to John Hancock. So eventually he sketched out, the top left was his sketch, and on right was how it looked when the final design was published in 1787 in the Columbian magazine. Here's what we recognize most today as our seal. And here, in case you wanted to know, I'm always curious about things. These are what everything means on that. You can see there are 13 stars, which represent the 13 colonies. There's 13 stripes, 13 arrows, and the arrows were put in one talon to prepare to defend liberty. The white signifies purity in the escutcheon, and the red obviously fight hardiness. The olive branch has 13 leaves and 13 olives, again to represent the colonies, and the eagle was a symbol of strength and power, but always the head turned to the olive branch, preferring peace. So that's how we got that. Now, quickly, let me tell you, you've probably all heard this quote from Ben Franklin. It's part of a quote in a letter he wrote to his daughter, Sarah, when he was trying to help the Order of Cincinnatus come up with a symbol. And so he was trying to advocate for the turkey because he felt that the bald eagle was of bad moral character, and he regretted that it's the symbol of the country. So he lobbied for that. He didn't get it. He said that the turkey was an original Native America, but so were bald eagles. So again, he didn't get his way then or now. So here's what we came up with. We think the reason people think that the turkey was presented to the Continental Congress by Ben Franklin is in 1962, almost 200 years later, the New Yorker had put this illustration on their cover, and the New Yorker's editor at the time was William Shawn. His son was Wallace Shawn, which you may have seen as the inconceivable guy in The Princess Bride, and he voiced Rex in the T-Rex in Toy Story. So we think this helped popularize Franklin's preference for the turkey. So there you go, you know about the bald eagle and the turkey now. When the colonists came to America, they decimated the wildlife population, particularly birds like the bald eagle. But basically what they did is they cleared the forest. We were over 90% forested at the time. They cleared the forest to make houses. They also sent wood overseas for ships, for masts and furniture. Any animal that they thought were a threat to them or their livestock, they would kill. We did have at the time, we did have native wolves. We did have native mountain lions. We had a lot of bear, and they would kill anything that they thought would would be a danger to them. And obviously, they did harvest certain parts of the bodies of these animals. Because of human act at the time in the 48 states, there were 50,000 nesting pairs of bald eagles. That's an estimate. Because of human activities, this population reached a low of 400 breeding pairs in the early 1960s. The bald eagle populations declined towards the early 20th century because of loss of habitat. They were shot a lot. They were trapped even on the ground. They were harvested for their feathers and other body parts were sold. During the 50s and 60s, the use of pesticides, especially DDT, became a major problem. What happened is the DDT residues would accumulate in fish, which is a major food source of the eagles. And those residues would then accumulate in the eagles as they ate it and cause their eggshells to be thin. So when they'd sit on the eggshells, they would break. So it is now banned in the U.S. Now we have a big problem with lead shot and lead lures, which I'm happy to say lead lures are illegal now in Connecticut. Illegal poaching. There's still a number of bald eagles, even though there's hefty fines that are shot by people and the feathers are sold. So lots of things we do, shooting, trapping, poisoning, human disturbance continue to be a problem. Rodenticides, poisons for mice and rats are becoming really lethal killers. I know you've seen in the news a lot of bald eagles and birds of prey here in Connecticut that are succumbing to that. So encourage all your friends to use those old snap traps. Better to bruise your finger, you know, than to let the bald eagles die. Or, you know, a lot of people I know catch them and have heart traps and then let them loose. So there are a lot of so that circle of life can happen outside. So there are a lot of ways to deal with that. The effects of DDT when I was a kid on a ranch in Texas, we had cattle, but I would see these crop dusters come, you know, dropping all that DDT, and who knows what it did to humans as well. But this started shortly after World War II, and it was hailed as a new pesticide to control mosquitoes and other insects. As you know, down on the shoreline, there is limited spraying for certain insects if there is disease because of them. But mostly these bad things are stopped. But DDT is totally banned. One woman, Rachel Carson, if you're in my age group, you probably read this allegory, Silent Spring. This novel led to the banning of DDT and was the springboard for the environmental movement. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. She even got threats on her life for suggesting that we shouldn't use DDT. But her courage and her book, which first appeared parts of it in the New Yorker in 1962, led to the creation of many environmental organizations and led to certain acts to protect animals from that time. So very important person in the history of the environmental movement. So how are eagles doing in the U.S. now? Oh, and I wanted to say only, you know, the bald eagle was put on the endangered species list, and only a handful of large wildlife species ever really have come off of that. And a couple of them along with the bald eagle are the American alligator and the California gray whale. Apparently there are a lot of smaller species that can make their way back, but it's harder for the larger ones. The bald eagle's recovery is probably the best known example of how well the environmental laws work to restore not just a resource, but our national symbol. When full adult plumage, it is just, I think, singularly magnificent. And I'm sure all of you see eagles flying around. We're lucky here in Connecticut to have quite a few nesting pairs. Unfortunately, because biologists are so busy all the time, we can't get a lot of really close, up-to-date numbers. So this is the latest I've seen. They were approaching 15,000 nesting pairs, and bald eagle populations generally are gauged by nesting pairs. You know, how many pairs are going to be having eaglets in the year. So we're probably over 15,000 now, which is just outstandingly remarkable. And you can just see the growth from 1963. And I'll tell you about some of the acts that have been enacted that have also helped protect the bald eagle and other species. The largest population of bald eagles obviously is in Alaska. If you've ever been there and go to places like Sitka, the bald eagles are like so many around, kind of like the pigeons in Central Park. It's estimated that Alaska has over 30,000 birds. In the lower 48 states, Minnesota and Florida have the most bald eagles. And so it is healthy and thriving. And now I'd like to show you their distribution. Bald eagles are not true migrators. They only really migrate as far as they have to go to find open water. Used to, when Connecticut didn't have its own nesting population, we would get bald eagles from the northern states. They'd come down until they found open water, and quite often Connecticut would have open water somewhere, even in a harsh winter. So you can see where the breeding is, but we now have breeding here in Connecticut, and we now have our own eagles year round, which is kind of exciting. So here's the latest, the 2020 statewide summary. I encourage you to be a citizen scientist. The DEEP every year joins a national initiative to do midwinter eagle surveys. And every year they get these numbers, and you know, unless you can read the bands on a bird, and not every bird is banded, you won't know necessarily if it's one of ours unless you know it's a nesting pair that's around. But these numbers they use and filter in with all kinds of other data to kind of determine the bald eagle population. So these would be the winter bald eagles. You can go to the DEP website and just Google midwinter eagle survey, and they can assign you a place to watch the eagles. It's usually 7 in the morning till 11, I think, on the second Saturday in January. A lot of times it's really cold, but it's really kind of a worthwhile thing to do and fun to get involved in. So you can see the pretty much progression of eagles along the way. And last year was pretty good. We haven't got the results of this year yet. Breeding season in 2020 was pretty phenomenal. It was produced the most chicks we've ever had here in Connecticut. So we had 88 chicks, and there were 72 active territories in the state, but only 47 of those produce successful nests. Sometimes what happens is the canopy will fall off over a nest, and so the nest can't be protected well enough. You know, there's many reasons, a lot weather related, why the nest wouldn't be successful. And these are the ones that we're able to get to and know about. So out of 47 successful nests, you know, 88 chicks is pretty good, since bald eagle chicks, once they fledge, only 50% of them survive their first year. It's hard for them to learn how to eat. They get electrocuted sometimes. They're on the road eating things, you get run over, just all kinds of things. But as you can see, the first nesting pair in Connecticut was in my hometown of Barkhamsted in 1992. And since that time, you can just see, can you imagine this, just the growth? It's phenomenal. People say, well, that was a long time ago. That doesn't look so good to me, but truly in a wildlife species, that's a magnificent result. Here's some Talons. This is older, 2018. You can look down below. The dark green is Talons that have bald eagle nests active. And like I said, this would have changed. We haven't got the update yet, but you know, there are overspread throughout the state, and there's really hardly any town you can be in that you couldn't see a bald eagle at one time. Connecticut has a lot of water, a lot of wetlands, rivers, a lot of lakes and ponds, and those are just perfect habitat for bald eagles. And so I'm sure that down there on the coast, you see them down there at Hammonasset. You can go up to Eagle Landing. There's a lot of places that you're probably going to see eagles flying around. And it's really, to me, very great. If I feel like I need to get a chill time, I'll go along the west branch of the Farmington River up here, and I almost always see an eagle daily. So here's eagles in Connecticut. In the 50s, there were no nesting eagles in the state. In 1992, when the first nesting pair appeared, they were endangered species here. In 2010, they were downgraded to threatened. 2018 started when we were really getting a boost in nesting. Here's the kind of history of the bald eagle. I was happy to get this shot at a lake in New Hampshire, and I couldn't get my big camera out because the waves were so high. I thought I was going to be submerged. So, but this eagle just kind of sat there and let me take its picture with my phone. So I was happy to get that. So in 1940, noting the species was threatened with extinction, Congress passed the Bald Eagle Protection Act, and it prohibited killing, selling, or possessing the species. So again, 1700 is very common. Then they enacted the Bald Eagle Protection Act. That helped that helped quite a bit. Then the Endangered Species Act came in 73. In 1995, the species was lowered to threatened in the United States. And in 2007 was taken off the list. They're still protected by multiple federal laws, which is great. So some of these laws that are protecting it are the Lacey Act, which is enacted in 1900, and that was pretty much enacted because a lot of bald eagles were being killed for feathers and down and other reasons. So this protected them. The Bald Eagle Protection Act had added to it the Golden Eagle in 1962, and that prohibited the taking, possession, sale, purchase, barter, offer to sell, anything really to do with the bald eagle other than just let them fly was illegal. Then the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, it was a precursor. It's kind of an international law with United States commitment to 4 conventions in Canada, Japan, Mexico, and Russia. These protect migratory birds across international borders, and these affect all bird species. So these acts really helped a lot in protecting these species. Just a little bit about things that are now, aside from what I told you already. Wind farms are slaughtering millions of birds and bats annually. The wind turbine companies, because we're looking for green energy, the government gave them an exemption for 30 years on killing eagles. Again, green energy is commendable. Everyone supports it, but modifications are being worked on and need to be made in wind turbines and where they place to counteract the slaughter of these magnificent animals. The electric companies are working pretty hard. When a bald eagle roosts sits on perches on a crossbar on an electric transformer or a pole, if the 1 foot hits the ground wire and their wing hits a live wire, they can be electrocuted instantly. So a lot of the electric companies have agreed to put these kind of triangular things up there to discourage the bald eagles from perching there. Bald eagles spend a large percentage of their time, over 90% in the winter, just roosting, perching, being still. So sometimes they use man-made structures. So hopefully these things will help, and hopefully we'll continue to have these companies. We have some garbage companies in my area now that have bear-proof garbage cans that you can buy, which is just spectacular. Just trying to do everything we can to coexist with our wildlife. How long can they live? Again, this is a bird I saw. I didn't have my good camera, but I was able to get a shot. And again, I think in Connecticut, if you're really quick on the draw, you can probably get some photos of bald eagles without great equipment. Anyway, for a large bird with no natural predators, their mortality or death rate can be quite high. As I said, a juvenile bald eagle, only 50% survive the first year of their life. After that first year, they stand a much better chance of living. They can live from 25 to 30 years in the wild. And it just depends on how they fish and the availability of food. Again, their most natural predator would be humans. They do get hit by cars because they do scavenge on roads, sometimes not as much as vultures and other things like crows, but they do. Uh, the oldest wild banded bald eagle on record in the U.S. and was an alumnus of a conservation program in New York State. They brought some young eaglets from different states. This particular one on the right was brought from Minnesota when it was just a few weeks old. It was known as 03142. That's one of its band numbers. They hoped that these young eagles would help bring back their population, and they did. A few years later, the male half of New York's only original breeding pair died, and 03142 took his place in an old nest in Hemlock Lake in the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge in New York State. So he had yellow wing tags at the time. Now they tag their, they have a state band for their feet. So likely they think he stayed at that nest the rest of his life because he died about 25 miles away when he was hit by a car while eating a rabbit in 2007. So he was 38 years old. So here's his talons. And probably they think that because he was old, he was trying to take easy food. So he was on a road, probably wasn't able to react as quickly. And probably that's how he got hit. But pretty magnificent story. There have been a few bald eagles in captivity that have lived to be 50 years old. So, so the bald eagle, it's a big bird. The females are larger than the males. The females 35 to 37 inches high. Their wingspans can be up to 8 feet and they can weigh up to 14 pounds. The male is 30 to 34 inches, wingspan 72 to 85 inches, generally about a 6-foot wingspan. Its weight's 8 to 10 pounds. When in a species, when the female is larger than the male, it's called sexual dimorphism. And but it's almost impossible to tell unless they're sitting side by side. Although if you're really like an acute bird watcher and have good lenses, the primary feathers on the birds offer an identifying difference if you can get close enough. The primary feather projection on the male extends to the tip of the tail, and on the female it does not. So you would see that dark primary feather there. Being smaller, the male's slightly quicker and more agile, giving him an advantage in catching prey. So once the eggs are hatched, the female will sit on them longer than the male because the male is more successful at bringing food in. Although the female does have to get off the nest some to, shake out her wings, get the lice off or whatever, just stretch out. But it's generally not for a long time. She's being larger, she can incubate the eggs better, brood the chicks, and she uses her body to shelter these offspring from the cold, soaking rains or hot sun. And as you know, here in Connecticut, generally speaking, right around when the eaglets are born, which is, mid-March to early April, we have those storms, where we get snow, then we get rain and high winds, which create havoc, in an eagle's nest. Northern eagles are up to 7 inches taller than southern eagles, so they're much bigger. And northern eagles are slightly larger. The male northern eagles are just slightly larger than the southern females. This is true in bear species and some other species. It's a scientific reason. I'll tell you about it in case you're into science. You can look it up. It's called the Bergmann's rule, Bergmanns, where body size is large in cold climates and small in warm climates. So part of what it says, large bodies have a smaller surface area to volume ratios. So in cold climates where you need to retain heat, bodies are larger and more compact. In warm climates where you need to expel heat, bodies are smaller and more linear. So there's much more to that, Mr. Bergmann's rule. You can look up if you're into science. Again, the male is 10 to 20% larger than, smaller than the female. And you can see on the left clearly the female. I wouldn't mess with her. Maybe I'd mess with the male, but that's pretty much the best way to tell you know, which is the male or female when they're pretty equally perched. Here again are some eagles up my way. Again, you can see the female. Right, this is right before they were going to mate, which you'll see later on. So a bald eagle has 7,200 feathers. Pretty remarkable, huh? And they're hollow, and they make up about 7 to 10% of its weight, and 30% of those feathers are on its head. Their bones are also hollow and take up only 5 to 6% of its body weight compared to our bones, which take up 20%. So I always joke with my friends when they're on a diet, well, there's 20% you can't lose. So just keep that in mind. Here are the different feathers that have importance in flight, their functions in flight. The primaries, which are like their little finger-like feathers, provide the thrust. Secondaries provide lift, and almost like a plane. You see those little flaps on the plane. And the rectrices provide braking and steering. So, and you can actually watch and see them use these. Here's the pretty good picture of the primaries. As you see, very broad, very powerful. But those big wings from 6 foot to 8 feet present problems if the eagles decided to perch, say, along the Farmington River where we have a lot of branches. So they'll perch in the branches, look down at the river, but if they have to go down to get prey, they have to put their wings up in a V shape and free fall for a short time until they're clear of the branches and can open those big wings. So this is an example of a typical profile of a soaring bald eagle. The wing formation here is called planking because it presents, kind of looks like a 2x4. This is one of the breeding pairs that I got a photo of here in our area. Again, so they'll do a few little quick wing flaps and they can soar for a long, long time. Quite often you'll see a number of eagles catching thermals. And again, thermals are, if you look at your teapot and see the steam come out in a little circular warm air steam, they catch these thermals, which are warm air, and they'll ride them high and high and high. Vultures do the same thing. Vultures are also a large bird, but not nearly as large as a bald eagle. But when they're all high up, it's kind of hard to tell them apart. But vultures typically have a V shape when they're in the sky, and they also rock back and forth. They're not very smooth. Bald eagle can fly 30 to 35 miles per hour, and it can dive only at 50 miles per hour because its body and bulk is much denser than the golden eagle, who can dive, as I said, at 200 miles per hour. Both male and female adult bald eagles have blackish brown back and breast, and of course the white head, neck and tail, and yellow feet. Their white head and white tail generally occur between 4 and 5 years old. Sometimes a little after 5 years, you'll still have a little smudging on the head and tail. The juveniles, their first year, like on the left, are a mixture of brown and white, but pretty dark brown. Their beaks are black and their eyes are brown, and those will turn over time. Their legs are also brown. Those change pretty quickly as they mature, and everything will be fully yellow by the time they reach 5. So here you can see, that's an unfocused shot, but you can see the two differences. You can see what now is an immature. So we call an eagle juvenile until its first year, and then from its second year up to the 4th year, it's called an immature, and it'll have different patterning of mottled white. And then when it's between 4 and 5, we call it a subadult. So, you know, that's kind of how, but sometimes it's hard to tell, well, is that really an immature or subadult now? But this one, you see the head is starting to get white and the tail feathers as well. This is one of my favorite stories about eagles, bald eagles. So you all know the famed ornithologist and artist John James Audubon, and apparently he was a pretty pompous guy. So he'd heard that there was like some majestic bird on the Mississippi River. So in 1814, he hired a guide, and a lot of the other ornithologists came down there too because they all wanted to see. And when he finally saw it, he called it the mightiest of the feathered tribe. He was so excited he discovered a new bird of prey that he named it the Washington sea eagle. So that night he was at a, you know, at a, whatever, a bar or whatever they called their places back then. And the other guy said, "Oh, wow, we got to go out and see this." So everybody runs out, sees this majestic bird. Turns out it was an immature bald eagle. So the joke was on John James Audubon, to the delight of the other fellow ornithologists. But he did still paint the bird. You know, it does still exist in his paintings. So again, you know, identifications of birds, even if you are good, sometimes are difficult. And, you know, with bald eagles between the age of being their first year until midway through their fourth, they can be mistaken for other things. This is a typical first year plumage of a bird up in Litchfield County. You can see the black beak and the black eyes. Here they are flying together after they fledge, which I'll show you the fledging aspect. Here's another one on the Connecticut River up in Hartford that I took. You can see this one has a lot more white mottling on it. There'll be different variations. That's why it's so difficult. But the second year, they get a little more white on them, not necessarily on the head. And you can see the beak is moving towards getting a little yellower, and the eye has a little yellow at the bottom of it. Third year plumage, this one was really, really white. So this one flying, looking underneath it, could easily probably be mistaken for an osprey or red-tailed hawk if it was high enough in the air and you didn't have glass on it. Here's one that's like really unusual. This photo was taken by Paul Fusco, who's a DEEP photographer. I'm using some of his photos, some of my friend Leo Kalinsky and my friend Cheryl Anderson. They have big lenses. And then I have the other photos I have taken. So I'm grateful for those. Here's fourth year plumage. You see things starting to change. The head's getting more mottled. This is early fourth year, what we would call subadult. And here again is an immature next to the adult, and obviously the one on the right is a female. So that's very you can differential, even though the one on the right is a little further down on the branch, you can still see that it's clearly bigger. So as an adult, they're just gorgeous. Look at those feathers, just gorgeous. This is a male. You can see those primary feathers just extending down over the white tail. So that is a way to see if it's a male or female if you're able to get a good view. So by the time they're 5 years old, generally their head and tail have transformed to white. Their beaks are yellow, their eyes are yellow. But it does vary, you know, a little bit by individuals. And now a bird that I'm sure most of you are familiar with down there on the shoreline is the osprey. We like to call the osprey the St. Patty's Day bird because that's generally when they migrate back and start to build their nests on their platforms. The bald eagle's very happy when that happens, although we don't know if they express happiness like we would, saying, oh, it's St. Patrick's Day, the osprey's coming back, let's have a drink. But because the osprey is one of the species that the bald eagle steals from the most. This is not a good comparison as far as head to scale, but it does show you their face and the differences. You know, that osprey has that mask. You know, they both have yellow eyes. The beaks are very different. The osprey's beaks are black. They're made for different, the osprey's much smaller. They're both sea eagles, and they do frequent similar habitats, and they do obviously compete over food. So the ospreys are kind of similar to the immature bald eagles because they have the brownish fur with white mottling, that dark colored bill, and the yellow iris. But the difference in body size is quite striking. The bald eagle's beak is more curved, larger, and sharper compared to the osprey. And again, the bald eagle can be 8 to 14 pounds, and the osprey has an average weight of 2 to 4.5 pounds. So quite the difference. Here's an osprey in flight. You can see that little mask extending behind its eye, that black stripe. But still, people sometimes, you know, they're still, you know, pretty big bird, mistake them for it. Here's one catching a fish. Now, a bald eagle can carry up to 4 pounds. Here's eating a fish. The reason being, can you imagine if once the bald eagle gets a 4-pound fish, it's got to get lift from those really big wings, you know, to get back up out of the water, and it doesn't really have a place to push off from. So it really, if it catches anything much bigger than 4 pounds, It generally will get in the water and swim to shore. Of course, this is dangerous if it is cold outside because they can get hypothermia pretty quickly. The osprey are prodigious fishers. That's why the bald eagle, once the osprey has started their nest, will lurk around the platform. So that's another good place to look for bald eagles, because they'll follow the osprey. And as soon as an osprey grabs a fish, they'll hector it in the air until it drops it. And a lot of times the bald eagle can snatch that fish right out of the air. Sometimes it just goes back into the water and swims off. But the osprey is probably its favorite bird to steal fish from, although will go after younger eagles. Eagles they're pretty gregarious with each other except for over prey. So they will fight each other over prey. So this is one of the eagles that's nesting in my area this day. I thought it was giving, I don't know what that look was at. It wasn't at me, but I liked it. Anyway, eagles are all about eyesight. They're renowned for their excellent eyesight, thus the term eagle-eyed. Eagles, like all birds, have color vision. An eagle's eye is almost as large as our eyes, and the sharpness is at least 4 times that of a person with perfect vision. An eagle can identify a rabbit moving almost a mile away. That means if an eagle is flying at an altitude of 1,000 feet over open country, it could spot prey over an area of 3 square miles from a fixed position. Superman, move over, I say. They do hunt by eyesight. Their eyes, though, are stationary, so they have to move their heads to see objects. They have 3D vision and binocular vision, and they have, like a lot of other animal species, a nictitating membrane which covers their eye and keeps debris out. It's like clear, so but it does protect their eyes. Here's a little their head to show you. It has the different parts of it, that nictitating membrane. You can see how really sharp that beak is. It can do a lot of damage on prey. But the business end of eagles are their feet or their talons. They have 4 toes. The rear toe, or the hallux, is kind of like our big toe. Their talons are made out of keratin, like our nails, and can grow up to 2 inches long. The eagle has a mechanism, as do some other birds of prey, in their talons that lock the talons while sitting on a branch. Didn't you always wonder how they could sleep and not spin around like in cartoons? But then they just kind of flex their leg and the talons unlock. So the talons, you can see, are very sharp. Look at the man's hand on the left, and very lethal. What do bald eagles need to survive? As most of us, even humans, well, we don't need nests, but we need our roosts, but we need food, nests. Bald eagles need privacy and healthy environment. A lot of our animal species in Connecticut now are becoming what we call ex-urban, which means they do tolerate a certain amount of civilization, whereas the early nesting eagles here in Connecticut would be in really, really remote places, a lot of times on reservoir property, not in sight. Now we do have some very public nests in Connecticut. One is actually in a cemetery in New Haven. But I said at least the residents are quiet, not to be disrespectful. But anyway, they do. There have been some that have made nests up within sight of a shopping center. So they have been a little less reclusive in their habits here. 90% of the bald eagle's diet is fish. They do attain food in one of 3 ways. Carrion, they steal it from other birds, and they hunt. Typically they'll steal from other birds, even though that takes a little energy. They will eat carrion, but it could be dangerous if it's dead stuff on the side of a road, obviously, and then they hunt. The osprey, who is a much more agile bird, they both dive feet first into the water. The osprey actually goes underwater. The eagle does not. But the osprey has much better odds at catching fish because its agility, its quickness, its ability to submerge. The bald eagle, when it stretches out those mighty legs, it can't see its prey anymore. So it just like hits the water with its talons, and then it's catch as catch can. So the osprey has a pretty good record, 7 to 8 out of 10 times it catches a fish. The bald eagle's about at 50%. So you can see why why it steals from the osprey. Uh, so in the winter, the bald eagle perches 90% of the time. That would include roosting or perching when it's foraging during the day. If they feed one day, they can. If they have to skip a day, generally they eat up to 1.5 pounds of food per day. Um, they can fly as high as 10,000 feet. Never seen them out an airplane window, but they can go there. And again, they fly about 30 to 30 miles per hour. But it's pretty quick. I can tell you when a bald eagle lifts off of a branch, you got to be quick with your lens. Probably have sports mode on because they fly really, really fast. Uh, again, they're a strong swimmer, but they can get hypothermia even with all those feathers. They can hunt from 1,700 to 10,000 acres. Their home areas where they nest are smaller, where food is abundant, generally about 2 miles. They will tolerate other eagles within a few miles of them as long as those eagles aren't messing with their nest. If another eagle, like a lot of time, immature eagles will come around, maybe their last year's eaglet, and kind of look at the nest, well, then the eagles will be ferocious at that time. But generally speaking, they do roost together, and you know, a ton of them, and so they're not real antagonistic, but only over their nests and their food. So here you see this adult bald eagle trying to snatch that fish from the immature, and the immature is really putting on a pretty ferocious look there, and you see the adult looks pretty calm about it all. I don't think he's really too concerned with that one. This is something I saw in Simsbury, Connecticut. I was driving on a pretty small road that didn't really have a shoulder, and all of a sudden I see a bird on the ground with a squirrel, and all of a sudden this huge bird comes swooping in. So that's a red-tailed hawk on the left and an eagle on the right. So I jump out of my car, you know, I'm trying to take photos, and this eagle flies up into the branches with the red tail. The red tail drops the squirrel. The squirrel actually runs off, so I guess it was okay. It survived the fall. And so this was pretty great to watch. You know, this eagle, even after there was no more prey there, decided that it really want to give the red-tailed hawk the what for. So that was pretty interesting. This, I was able to get a shot of the bald eagle with a fish. My friend told me what kind of fish that is, but I can't remember. It's pretty darn big, but you can see the eagles. I was in my kayak just looking right at me like, you're not getting this bird. Again, they'll congregate together a lot. And then although they do feed primarily on fish, they are opportunistic predators and scavengers. They'll eat anything that can be caught or easily scavenged. They will eat a lot of waterfowl, but they'll have to swim it to shore. Small and large mammals. They'll feast on livestock carrion. Not likely they're going to carry off your little cats and dogs, though. They're not probably going to be swooping down in your yard unless maybe you're right on a marsh or, you know, right by the ocean or something like that. Their habitat obviously is around lakes, marshes, rivers, sea coasts. So you guys are in a great place to see bald eagles, places that have good fishing, not too many obstructions, but they will travel up to 12 miles from a feeding area to a roosting site. You know, and they typically get in very dense evergreen trees and will roost with other eagles. These sites are picked for protection from wind because wind can really drain their body temperature. And so they will, it's kind of cool when you can see them all perched, roosting together at night. Life cycle of eagles. Traditionally, they have chosen remote areas. Again, like I told you, white pines used to be their favorite spot, but the important thing is to have a canopy over the nest, which helps protect the nest if it snows or rains. So this time of year, starting in January, generally speaking, the Connecticut eagles are coming back together and starting to bring materials to their nests to shore up their nest. They are mate for life. They do mate for life. The only time they wouldn't is if they're not producing eaglets, or obviously if one dies. They do return to the same nest as long as those nests, you know, aren't damaged too much by weather. Their nests are called eyries. So they'll start bringing, like on the Connecticut River down near Haddam, there's a nest you can see. And you can see the eagles when they bring the sticks and everything. They will do this through January and February. On average, the nests are at least 10 feet off the ground, can be up to 100 feet. They can be, the average nest is probably maybe 5 to 6 feet wide. And each year it gets higher because they keep adding to it. And so it can weigh an average of 2,000 pounds. They use sticks and twigs up to 3 inches in diameter and 3 to 4 feet long. I've seen eagles bouncing on branches until they snap. They'll then line the nest with smaller, like softer debris like pine needles, grass, and evergreen. But I can tell you that once they bring these materials to the nest, it's the female that arranges everything inside of the nest. So that's kind of interesting. Here's one of the eagles bringing nest material. Again, they both bring it. Again, you can see that it's just come off of the tree and it's spreading its wings out. There's another stick. So you can see they can only really carry one stick at a time. So it does take much of January and February for them to get their nest ready for breeding. Again, here's some of that soft material as they fly. So here's the average timeline of nesting season in Connecticut. You know, we did see some eagles this November and December breeding, but it probably wasn't real breeding, and they were hanging around together earlier than normal. Not sure yet. That's something the biologists are trying to figure out. Is this is some new pattern because of the weather? Once they start though getting the nests ready, they're moving more towards breeding. And you can see this is the whole process. Once the eggs are laid until fledging, it's about 120 days before the fledging. So this is the largest bald eagle nest ever recorded. It was in St. Petersburg, Florida. It was almost 10 feet wide and 20 feet deep, and it was estimated to weigh more than 2 tons, 4,409 pounds. Now, how do you weigh that? I guess when it all fell down, they just put it in a truck and went and weighed it. I'm not sure. So again, I wanted to go back to, oh, sorry, I went the wrong way. Hold on. The clear skies in February are good for eagles when they get their nesting materials. But as it is, we've had a pretty severe winter, so probably was a little harder for them. Here are 2 adults in their nesting tree. This is not that large of a nest. You can hardly see it because of all the pine boughs. It's still weeks here before they'll lay their eggs, so they'll just kind of hang out and they'll both fish and eat. So they don't hang out in the nest after the young have fledged. The young will keep coming back to the nest, and the adults will stay around for about a month, and then they'll all go their separate ways. This is a Valentine's shot, not to anthropomorphize eagle behavior, but it does look intimate, doesn't it? But I think the depth of field, they're not really touching beaks there, but interesting. Here again, you can see there's some pretty big branches up there. While the eagle's just kind of hanging around. There they both are, just hanging around, waiting until time to mate. Here's a nest that got covered over. This was actually in March in 2018, so they have a lot to deal with because they're going to start laying those eggs soon. And their mating ritual, you probably heard of this, their beautiful dance. It's called the cartwheel display or the death spiral. They put a lot of wild and wildlife for the courtship ritual. They will lock talons. They soar up high, lock talons, and tumble and cartwheel towards the earth. They are not mating now. It's just like a ritual. They do let go before reaching the ground, except when they don't. In 2014, 2 adult eagles' talons locked and were found tangled in a Portland, Oregon tree, but they eventually broke free and flew off. So this time of year, we're moving towards mating season, and they're getting that nest ready. Here they are together here. Again, beautiful specimens. They're always, you can see those eyes. They're always scoping out things, always trying to be aware of some prey they can have. not to be crude, but I was lucky enough to get eagles mating. I wouldn't have done it if it was just for a photo, but since I give eagle talks, I thought we have to have it. So anyway, here's our reproduction cycle. They lay eggs 5 to 10 days after they mate. One at a time, they 2 to 3 a day, 1 to 4 eggs. Usually around 3 is more normal. Their incubation is fairly short, 34 to 36 days. Both the male and females share these duties, although the female does more because even less than 5 seconds, if it's severely cold out, could kill the embryos. The hatching occurs over 48 hours. And again, the nesting cycle is about 20 weeks. This is a really fascinating thing about the eagles. It's called a brood patch. It's an area on the parent's chest that doesn't have feathers. It's the area that touches the eggs while the parent is incubating them and allows for a more efficient transfer of heat. Not all birds develop a brood patch, but in species such as the bald eagle, both parents can develop the patch because, as we see each day, they share the incubation duties. It starts to develop on their breast or abdomen just before the female lays the eggs through hormonal changes that cause the feathers that cover that area to fall out on their own. And that leaves that wrinkled patch of bare skin. You can see, if you look closely, kind of the blood vessels, and they will fill with warm blood. And if you see the female, when they sit on the eggs, their heads are lower down than in those photos you saw with the two adults sitting in their nest because they're, hunkered down on those eggs. The female, if you see them wiggle as they settle upon the eggs, they're spreading that bare patch over the eggs to keep them warm. Again, about 35 to 36 days are required for the embryo to develop into eaglets. So here's the size of the eggs. They're laid in, sometimes late February to mid-March. It's sometimes hard to gauge when. Again, usually 1 to 3 eggs in Connecticut is the average. And when the little one is starting to come out, it uses what is called an egg tooth. If you look on the little fledgling, the little eaglet there, you can see a white spot on top of the beak. That is their egg tube. And in that left egg, you can see that little white spot. So it's, let me out of here. So it's a pointed chisel-like structure that the chick employs on the tip of the beak, designed for cracking the shell. So that's another kind of interesting thing about the eagles. Here's their size. They are 3 to 4 ounces when born. They can't lift their heads for days. They grow at a rate of about a pound a week. I guess parents, you're happy your kids didn't grow that fast. By their 3rd week, they're almost a foot tall. Imagine that. 4 to 5 weeks, they'll stand and move around. Nearly full grown at 6 weeks. At 8 weeks, they'll stand at the edge and nest and flap and get ready, to learn to fly at 10 to 12 weeks. So when they do have their chicks, you can see those egg beaks on these little ones. The bald eagles tend to favor the firstborn, kind of like a survival of the fittest thing, figuring that the firstborn is going to be stronger. So if there's 3 chicks, the 3rd one sometimes dies because it can't get enough food. The bald eagles are constantly feeding them fish, and the adults will rip apart the fish. The chicks will snatch the food from the adults and just swallow it whole. Again, the male does most of the hunting, and the female most of the feeding and brooding. The chicks will eat as much as they can at a single feeding and store food in their crop, which is an organ that's located near the base of their neck. Sometimes it fills up and enlarges as large as a golf ball. Again, they come into this world kind of helpless. Their legs are too weak to hold their weight. Bald eagles this is called altricial, ALTRICIL, which means they must rely 100% on their parents to protect them and care for them, which I think is probably true of, of kids too, right? But again, they do grow rapidly. And then by 2 weeks, they're starting to be able to hold their heads up. They can thermoregulate their body temperatures. They can maintain a near constant temperature, which helps in keeping them healthy and alive. So here's the male getting some fish to bring it there. At about 3 to 6 weeks, the black juvenile feathers start to grow in. Even though the downy feathers are excellent insulators, they're useless and must be replaced with the feathers before an eaglet can take its first flight. So about 6 weeks, the eaglets are almost as large as their parents, except for their wings muscles aren't developed. At 8 weeks, the appetites are at their greatest, so the parents will hunt almost continuously to keep feeding them. And that's when the eaglets start to stretch their wings. They're starting to lose their down feathers. In this picture, you can see. Again, you can see on the left, you can just see that beak because the sun makes it look grayish. I'm going to take a drink of water, sorry. But this eaglet's getting bigger now. So at 8 weeks, they'll start stretching their wings and moving around the nest and let their wings respond to gusts of wind. And they might hover above the nest a little for short periods as they get stronger. Sorry. At about 9 to 10 weeks, they begin what we call branching. So they'll start getting out on the branches, but not far from the nest. And this is kind of fun to see, and they'll kind of move their wings. And I think they look down and look kind of terrified, but anyway, they just innately know how to do these things. And between 12 and 14 weeks, they'll fledge. It's all individual and different, not exactly at those times. Again, they need that steady diet of fish. Sometimes they'll supplement with waterfowl, ducks, and geese, which the adult will tear apart before bringing it up to the nest. So sorry for this picture, but one of the most incredible things to me, an eagle will not soil their nest, so they'll go outside the nest to do their business. Well, one time I saw at a nest, an eagle chick, just tiny little thing, it was only like 3 weeks old. It went up on the side of the nest, put its rear end outside the nest and did the same thing. So that was pretty amazing that they knew how to do that. So this was in early May, so the eaglet's reaching full size now. You can see, though, it's still taking food from the parent. This is in mid-June. When the eaglets are nearing full size, you see still clinging near that nest, but there's one on a ground nest. In some places where there aren't tall trees, you will have birds on ground nests, and you can see the bands on this eaglet, which I'll tell you about soon. Again, here's the eaglets at about 2 months old, 9 weeks old, sorry. They will add more weight as they start to fly and use their wings. Here again, you can see they're almost the size of the adult. Hard to tell whether that's male or female, either one of them. Again, here they are now. They're branching. The one beneath the mother there, or the father, and getting ready to fly. And this one had already left the nest and went to a dead branch underneath, and I thought looked a little terrified, but is kind of using those wings, figuring out now how do I get back. So here's another type of nest that's kind of on the side of a cliff. Interesting, the different types of nests. These nests more resemble what you'd call an eyrie, which golden eagles have nests a lot on the side of cliffs. Here's another, I don't know how they kept them when they were small from falling out of that nest. Again, here's one just before a fledgling. Here's one in the nest now, testing out the wings, getting strength, clinging to the branches like, do I have to, Mom? And they're off. Here they are. This is in July, right about the time when they're going to fledge. Here they are. You can see the difference in coloration. That's hard to see because it's silhouetted. And the youngsters oftentimes will do a mock cartwheel. They'll fight with each other and play around just like your kids scuffle. So not unusual. It's just their way of trying to figure out what they can do in the air. Here the two are once they've gotten off the nest, and this one's like, oh, maybe I'll fly again. It was kind of fun. And the other one's like, not so sure about that. So, and this brings us to how is a young eaglet banded? Move over, Spider-Man, because the biologist does climb up the tree Once the eaglets are just about full size, around 6 weeks, we'll put a cloth over the eaglet and grab it. The interesting thing is the adults, which will really protect their nest against owls, raccoons, other eagles. When the biologist goes up the tree, the eagles just kind of go to a tree nearby and chirrup, but they don't go after the biologist because they think he's a pretty big bird. So they do lower these eaglets down, and there'll be other biologists on the ground. And they'll measure it, weigh it. They put bands on it. They'll receive 2-leg bands. The right leg gets the federal silver band, which has a unique 9-digit number that's issued by the National Bird Banding Laboratory in Maryland. The left leg gets a band with large letters that can be seen with a good camera or scope, and that is the state band. Connecticut uses black bands with white letters. New York has blue bands, and Massachusetts has orange bands. So these are a way to identify a bird if you have a good enough scope. Sometimes you can see them. A friend of mine, this is one of the Bantam Eagles, and we found out it was now nesting pair here in Connecticut, but it was from up near Quabbin Reservoir. Again, there's the Connecticut band. And why band eagles? This gives us info on how successful our birds are and where they disperse to. They only band the chicks, and it's only way to age a bird once it has reached adulthood. And they were very happy, not that 38-year-old bird died in New York State, but they really were able to tell, where it originated and where it stayed. So that was very valuable. If you look on this band here on the left there, you'll see a band. My friend got this photo of a bald eagle in Granby, and it wasn't really near water, although there is water all around us. But she got it out of her car and quickly got it. She was able to use Photoshop to read the band, and she contacted the banding place in Maryland, and they sent her this certificate. So if you can read the band, you can see the history. It was banded in Michigan, and this bird had come all the way out here. So quite interesting. Again, here's the different colors of the bands in the area. And don't know why Massachusetts got gold and we got black, but ours are pretty easy to read. This is an interesting story. There's a lot of eagle cams out there that I encourage you to watch. Sometimes it's like watching grass grow, but then all of a sudden something will happen really quickly. But proof that wildlife families come in all shapes and sizes and species. These 3 eagles and out in the upper Mississippi River Refuge are now a threesome. There are 2 males and a female. Star is on the left. That's the female. You can see considerably bigger, even though she's kind of hunched down. Valor 1 is to the far right. Well, for some reason, Valor 1 decided to leave and then didn't come back during the nesting cycle. So Valor 2 moved in and helped out, and then Valor 1 comes back. And so now apparently they didn't fight each other. All 3 birds now take part in nest maintenance, incubation, and raising the young. The refuge, which again is the Upper Mississippi River Refuge, does host a live webcam, and it offers a rare view of an eagle trio cooperatively nesting and raising young together. It's not unheard of. There were trios documented only a few times in Alaska in 1977, in Minnesota in 1983, and California in 1992. What might make it different is that both males are mating with the mom, whereas early examples had the second dad was more of a live-in nanny. So I just thought that was interesting little sidelight. How can you observe eagles here in Connecticut? I'm sure down on the shoreline you see them quite frequently. In the winter, we have an influx of northern eagles. That's true also of rough-legged hawks. That was also the reason why we used to get snowy owls in the winter. Now there's other reasons, some because of food availability, young birds coming down. But in the winter is probably the best time to see eagles. The branches are thin. We have more northern eagles here with our resident population. If you're around waterways, rivers, Connecticut River, Farmington River, all those rivers, Housatonic, they're usually there. Marshes, any open water, pretty easy to see them. So I'd encourage you, just in this time of pandemic, you can hop in your car, get some coffee or hot chocolate, and just go sit in an area you think there might be an eagle. Seeing great wildlife also sometimes is just random circumstance, and other times it's just patience. So this was a shot of a young eagle, like, give me some food. It's like, so anyway, thanks to my friends Paul and Cheryl and Leo for giving me some photos, and the eagles, long may they soar. So I'm ready to take any questions. Let me stop my sharing. Okay.
All right. Thank you. And we actually have several questions. So I'm going to read off some of the questions that we had on Facebook.
Okay.
And near the beginning, you mentioned that size doesn't determine an eagle. Someone wanted to know, what are common characteristics in the eagle family?
Meaning differences in male and female. The most discernible.
Well, I think they mean between different species of eagles. What do all eagles have in common? All different species have in common.
Oh, you mean with the other eagles in the world? Well,
yeah.
We have the sea eagles. So what they would have in common is that they hang around waterways. They eat mostly fish. They're all carnivores. The golden eagle is a carnivore, but generally eats, mammals. So basically, the thing they have most in common is they're pretty much on the top of the food chain of all birds of prey. They're highly powerful. They have great ability to feed themselves and don't have a lot of predators. Pretty much is the similarities.
You also talked about some of the hazards or risks to eagles, and you mentioned lead. Someone wanted you to bring up fishing line, that is also something that happens. And I don't know if you remember, we had one on the Connecticut River.
Yes, all those things are a big problem because, we have great resources for hunters and fishermen and women in our state. But there is a tendency sometimes to leave fishing line out. It gets tangled up. You'll see bobbers hanging from trees. We're trying to, DEP has put out a number of monofilament tubes. I'm sure you might have them down at Hammonasset, where people are encouraged to put their fishing lines in there. Of course, you can't have them everywhere. You just, we try really to educate the public. Unfortunately, a lot of the public we reach are environmentally respectable people. They don't think, and they would think I'd never put down a fishing line, or I never would. But, tell your friends if they fish, tell your friends if they hunt. Please don't leave your fishing line, don't leave your hooks. And for goodness sake, you can change from lead shot to copper shot. What happens to animals when they get lead poisoning? Say a bald eagle goes to a deer carcass, and so the hunter has dressed the deer, but didn't, take out the shot or anything. Just an infinitesimal amount of lead can kill a bald eagle. So that's why we're trying very hard to hopefully get the public to change into copper bullets. I know that hunters, when I grew up, people had, I don't know how many boxes of shotgun, ammunition in their closets, I mean, it would last them their whole lives. So it's a hard uphill battle, and it takes all of us to kind of just, not lecture people, but kind of just say, hey, do you hunt? Do you use lead shot? And could you change, or, stuff like that. So we try really hard to educate how to coexist and help. And again, like I said, right now, rodenticides or poisonings are really also a very high. And there are many animals that are hung by those fishing lines. So if you see them, I carry little scissors with me. And whenever I see those, I always cut them out. Unfortunately, a lot of times they're in places you can't get to very often. I'm sure that you guys have cleanups around if you can get people to do cleanups around waterways once or twice a year, then you can get rid of stuff like that. A lot of people have waders, you know, you can get out there and get that stuff. So, I mean, it's incumbent on us to try to help get rid of this stuff and also tell people just what a horrid death you might be causing if you just inadvertently let these things fall.
Yes. The next thing someone wanted me to mention, a place called Hope is our local raptor rehabilitator. They
Yep.
actually got an eagle just recently that was entangled in fishing line over the summer. And they didn't think they would be able to get it, but they were able to get it, but it does have lead poisoning.
Yes,
So,
I can't say enough about a place called Hope. Connecticut's very lucky for a small state to have a bunch of really remarkable rehabilitators, you know, especially with birds of prey. And I don't even know how they do it. I mean, my heart would be sad all the time, you know, because they do have to face these situations, you know, caused by humans mostly. And lead poisoning is just sickening to see in a bird. You know, the birds are so majestic and you can see them fighting really hard to try to stay well. They have to have chelation therapy. Some make it. And there's another organization, Christine's Critters, who she dove into the Farmington River to save an elder, like 16-year-old eagle who turned out had lead poisoning. And it was in the winter, and they did get it to where it's alive and well, but it'll never be able to be released. So lead poisoning is just a hugely horrible thing for these birds of prey. And a place called Hope, all these places just devote so much time. You know, I can't, you know, if you want to give money, those places are really worth it if you care about, you know, birds of prey. The type of work they do is just astounding, and I can't ever say enough about them.
absolutely. Also, I do volunteer at a place called Hope, and I want to let everyone know if you're interested in visiting, we do tours, usually on Mondays. And it's just a $30 donation, and you'll get a private tour of the facility and get to meet all of the ambassador birds at a place called Hope. So I would recommend that to anybody that would like to support them and visit with the birds.
It's a great thing to do because, like, I think $30 can like feed a raptor, you know, for quite a few months. So you know, it's not an insignificant number. And you know, in normal times, you know, we're going out spending $30 like doing almost nothing. So you know, if you really have a love of wildlife, it's a great thing. And to be able to go on site and see the birds is really remarkable as well. It's a great thing to do right now because you can keep socially distanced and kind of really see these birds and see how their wings are and how they act and everything. So, and
Yeah.
it's right there. So,
We also had a comment. Someone would like to know about this program being recorded, and we will put it up on our website, so you can go back if you missed the beginning or any portion of it, or just want to watch the whole thing again. It will be at meigspointnaturecenter.org in the virtual learning center. And usually I have a group of great volunteers that add additional content. So we might put vocabulary lists and other things to go along with it if you would like to visit the website. And so let's leave it with this. Somebody would like to know the best places in Connecticut to see eagles and what's the best time of year to watch them.
well, you know, I think winter's a great time because, like I said, you don't have the branches. You know how you can see so much when you're out in the woods in the winter. You guys, you know, just drive up the Connecticut River. I mean, I'm sure they're flying down by the shore as well, but right now they're going towards their nests, and there are a number of nests on the lower Connecticut River. Eagle Landing up there in Haddam. I go on the I'm an interpreter on the Eagle Flyer for the Essex Steam Train, and usually President's Weekend and the following weekend, but of course we're not doing it this year. A little further away from the shoreline in Southbury, Connecticut, is Chippewa Dam, where the electric company there has an eagle blind, and they have turbines there at the dam that churn up the water when they're creating energy. So it keeps the ice all broken up. So all these eagles know this, and so do mergansers and other ducks or waterfowl. And we've seen 22 eagles a day there. They'll have, although we're not doing it this year because of COVID, but they'll also have live birds of prey shows during the day because, and it's from 9 till 1, and it's free. All you have to do is register on the website, and they get the wild birds of prey just because in case the eagles don't show, but they almost always show. And as soon as an eagle's brought out, an eagle tends to fly overhead. So that's also a great place, but you know, that's closed now. So, you know what I said, nature is really random, and we have abundant wildlife in our state and really a lot of birds of prey. Harder to see an owl than an eagle, obviously. And, or I'm seeing peregrine falcons a lot. You know, you see red tails all the time. They're year-round residents. But just go near some water, and also look on, you know, Facebook or some of those sites that are birding. You know, sometimes they won't tell you where the purple people eating bird is because it's not safe really to have, as you guys know with snowy owls, it's very detrimental to those owls for us to get too close. You know, they're ground hunting owls, and you don't want to get too close to scare them. I mean, if you can see them from hundreds and hundreds of yards away, that's better than most people, you know. So we do need to respect these species and try to, you know, help make them live in a state that's very fragmented by roads and growth, but we still have a lot of great wild places. So it's not a great answer, but the Connecticut River, there's quite a few nests that you can see a nest if you go to Eagles Landing State Park and then drive the road. I always get the wrong direction. I think north, not far from the airport landing strip across the river. There is an eagle's nest, and it's in the tree that's right near a few houses that are on like a little promontory. So you actually, if you have, you can see that nest, you can see the birds flying around there. So that's a pretty good spot, not too far from you. And I've seen eagles. Where do I stay when I stay at Essex? Maybe in, not Mystic or Clinton, somewhere down there, there's a couple of inlets where you'll see a lot of eagles just flying in. Now, eagles, like I said, perch 90% of the time in the winter, but they also will start fishing more in the morning, you know, so if you're a morning person, your odds are better. But towards evening, they might fish again. So midday, they kind of just are hunkering down. So like I said, it's random, but if you have patience and look, you know, sit and look, you'll see stuff. Early morning's really good for all wildlife, though, generally.
Yeah. Speaking of bird watching, I don't know if you can see on my camera right now, there are, I don't know, 12 or 13 people around a pine tree.
Yeah.
They're looking at a red crossbill or red crossbills.
Awesome. Yeah.
So they created a traffic jam over there.
Yeah, you know, it's like, it's a two-edged sword, to use a cliche. It's like, you know, everybody's so excited. I'm so happy that people are so love wildlife and excited about it. But sometimes we become a bit much for it, you know. And these little songbirds probably aren't affected as much as some of our big birds of prey. But you know, we still need to keep a respectful distance, and hopefully.
I always like to tell people, if your behavior is changing the behavior of the wildlife, then you're too close. So keep that in mind, that you don't want to change their behavior. You want to stay far enough away that they're not going to pay attention to you.
Right. Unfortunately, with those smaller birds, you know, you can't see them as well. But you know what, I like to say sometimes, I tell my friends in Texas, I can't believe that we have the wildlife we have here. And I'm surrounded on 3 sides by People's State Forest. So I'm on a path from the forest to the reservoir. So quite often in the summer, a lot of bears come through. But, you know, I just say sometimes if I don't see a certain species, just the fact that I know they're there and thriving is just remarkable, you know, and then just really count yourself lucky when you are able to see any of these animals. Because, you know, for a state that's fairly populated and fairly suburban and urban, we're pretty lucky, really. We have a lot of stuff here.
Absolutely. All right, I want to thank you. This was a fantastic program. We've had over 150 people tuned in between Facebook and Zoom, so it was a great turnout today. Want to remind everybody we've got a lot more programs coming up. Saturdays at 10 o'clock are our guest speakers, and I'm doing Facebook Live programs Tuesday through Friday at 11, so make sure you tune into those. And I guess with that, we can sign off for now.
Thank you very much. So everybody stay well and enjoy the fall, and happy eagle looking. I don't want to say hunting, so we'll say looking. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.